Long ago, each October, the skies over Foxhole would darken, and from the shadows something would begin to stir. This is the story of Dead Harvest. Foxhole has always been a game that focused on strategy, logistics, and brutal front lines. But back in October 2018, something unique happened. The devs at Siege Camp, then known as Clapfoot, decided to throw in a seasonal twist. It's believed that the idea for the Dead Harvest event may have originated from this old Discord post by Drunken Russian Bear back in 2016. In it, they wrote a short story about the two factions uniting to fend off a zombie horde, ending with the line, "Got bored and wrote this for a Halloween event suggestion." While it's unclear if this post directly inspired the devs, what we do know, according to a 2018 dev blog, is that the Dev Harvest event was born from what the devs called a game jam session. We treated this endeavor like a game jam. Essentially, game jams are events in which developers can prototype an experimental idea into a playable game in a very short period of time. The Dead Harvest Halloween event was the output of our game jam. End quote. From what I read, the devs managed to bring this entire concept to life within just a week, and so the first Dead Harvest event was born. The main focus of this game mode was to turn players into zombies and hunt down either the Colonials or Warden survivors. On the small map of Tempest Island, the event was modest in scope, as Foxhole players' base was still relatively small at the time. This was long before World Conquest existed. Since there wasn't an overarching war system yet, the matches were hosted on separate servers and confined to a single region. Each round lasted just a few hours. The core gameplay loop revolved around a tense day-night cycle. By day, humans scavenged supplies and fought off slow zombies. At night, zombies grew faster and stronger, and players had to fortify and defend a church. If it fell, the match ended. There was no win condition for the humans, only survival. This is what one of the devs had to say about the gameplay during a dev stream.
It's called the Dead Harvest Accord because it's about Colonials and Wardens for the first time standing side by side. And I think there's some really interesting stuff in there. And I think there's some really interesting scenarios because you guys as humans have access to this center, this really easily fortified space that you can build walls and you can go sort of keep stuff out. But as soon as you need something, you have to leave. And because you have to leave, that exposes you. And I think there could be some really interesting gameplay there.
During this game mode, resources were limited, with no scrap nodes and no crafting. Players relied on scavenging, and all items were hand-placed by the devs all around the map. Powerful weapons were often hidden in hard-to-reach spots, and if you died, it meant joining the zombie horde, unless you had a rare totem that let you respawn as a human. Trenches didn't exist back then, so players had to just throw some defenses together the best that they could. Players made the most of what they had. But during the match, as materials dwindled and the zombie horde grew, defenses would slowly begin to crumble. By the end, players would be holed up inside the church, guarding the last door as the undead swarmed in. During this event, the Wardens and Colonials had to work together. Friendly fire was disabled to prevent chaos in spawn zones, and each faction had their own spawn point on opposite corners of the town square. There was an unspoken agreement that each faction defended their half of the town square. It was one of the only times both factions were forced into a true cooperation. Zombie gameplay was simple but satisfying. You could be randomly selected at the start of the match, or become a zombie after dying without a totem. The more humans you killed, the stronger you got. At first, you'd die from a simple rifle shot. After a dozen kills, you could tank a heavy machine gun and keep moving. The zombies would all gather together like a mammon rush and charge at the humans. It was one of the most satisfying things to watch. This event was well received by the player base and everyone loved it. It was talked about so much after the event ended that the devs decided to bring it back again the next year, but this time with a few changes. The second Dead Harvest marked a major shift for the event. It was no longer hosted on isolated servers. It had to be fully integrated into the broader World Conquest environment. Here's how one of the developers described the challenge. This was not easy. The undead players, first and foremost, had to have some sort of objective, otherwise their gameplay could quickly become stale. The easiest way was, of course, to have them be able to win World Conquest, either by destroying all town halls, conquering territory, killing a certain number of players, or breaking down all the sacred trees on the map. Yes, at some point I considered sacred trees as a viable objective." End quote. Two major hurdles emerged in the development. First, they essentially had to create an entirely new faction, the zombies. Foxhole's systems were originally designed with just two sides in mind, so much of the game's underlying logic constantly checked which faction a player belonged to. According to the devs, this made implementing a third side a coding nightmare. The second issue was gameplay. How do you make zombies fun to play. The dead horde, by its own nature, can only run and attack, without the added possibility of using vehicles or weapons. I had to ensure undead playing felt fresh. We went for the level up mechanic. The fact that it was an appropriation of last year's system was a nice bonus. Time saved in the programming budget. End quote. This leveling system evolved into 3 distinct zombie types that players could be. The basic run and kill zombie, one that could have a ranged attack, and one gigantic brute with a powerful AoE slam. They had developed all the concepts, modeling, and even the animations, but unfortunately they ran into a roadblock. The animations and models for these abilities hit a technical wall, and the engine couldn't support custom attack animations for zombies, so the devs had to improvise. This is how the devs decided to balance it out. The ranged undead who would have attacked from a safe distance instead got a huge speed boost, faster than anything in the whole game. This way, a player would be able to quickly enter and exit combat, trying to keep yourself safe. Well, if I can't make him physically larger on screen, I can certainly make him more armored. This beast can take a lot of damage and dish it out as well. End quote. One other concept that didn't quite make it to the final event was the idea that zombies had to gather different organs in order to evolve and become stronger. This unfortunately didn't make it very far in the design process, because the zombies had no way of interacting with items and could only attack. Despite these limitations, 2019's Dead Harvest added one of Foxhole's most iconic vehicles, the mech. It's officially called the Centurion, though it was originally going to be named the Paladin. It had 2 machine guns, a cannon, and a spotter seat. Its towering height also gave players an incredible field of vision. It was literally inspired by naval cannons on legs. The new mech was fun to play around with, though it was oftentimes super buggy. But even with these new additions, the zombie gameplay was not well received by players compared to the first Dead Harvest event. Zombies now spawn from special bases located on the edge of the map. Their main objective was to claim as many of these bases as possible, which would reduce the amount of daylight and bring about a permanent night, giving the zombies the upper hand. During the early parts of the event, most of the supply lines were cut for both factions. Getting reinforcements to a region was very difficult, as the nighttime was almost constant. Defenses ranged from basic sandbags to massive outposts equipped with field machine guns. Later in the war, defending became easier thanks to AI-controlled turrets. Leveling up a zombie was a tough task as well. The base variant for the zombies was incredibly fragile, and the only way to heal yourself was getting kills. This made early gameplay very punishing, but once a zombie was upgraded to what they called EverTech tier, you could move so fast that most human weapons couldn't reliably hit you. Unfortunately, this time around, the Wardens and Colonials did not have peace for very long. Because this was set under the World Conquest game mode, they were still at war with one another. Clans began weaponizing zombie hordes for their own advantage, turning the undead into a tool for warfare. And this is how we got some of the Dead Harvest lore that we have today. Here's the information that we have on the Dead Harvest lore. Long ago, every year, a ceremony took place to commemorate the lives lost in the wars between the Colonials and the Wardens. This event would allow restless spirits to find peace and not to have to watch the strife of war. This kept the spirits at bay, and this was how the pact known as the Harvest Accord was established. It was meant to be honored each autumn to maintain peace. During the last 100 years of the war, the ceremony was not carried out as both sides continued fighting through the time allotted to the accord. This led to a curse appearing and the rested spirits possessing the bodies of the dead, if that body did not possess a totem. As a result of this, the Colonials and Wardens were forced to stop fighting and engage with the undead together, as neither side could face fighting the other faction and the undead at the same time. In the face of the spirits growing stronger with each soul consumed, both sides made a stand. Fast forwarding 50 years, and we arrive at the first Dead Harvest event on Tempest Island. The undead eventually overran the island, leaving only a handful of human survivors. Curious and reckless, scientists from both the Colonial and Warden factions secretly recovered bodies from Tempest Island. They began experiments and research on these bodies. This is the lore from that island if you want to pause the video and read through it. Moving forward to 2019, this is when the undead had managed to reach the mainland, but eventually the undead were defeated and contained by both factions. Soon after, both sides continued experimenting with the undead, weaponizing them for use against one another. This arms race led to the creation of the Scourge Hunter mech by the Wardens, a new generation of mechs built for the evolving threat. And this is the last lore information that we heard about Dead Harvest from one of the devs.
It started out where the Cursed were very much a neutral threat against both factions, but over the course of the war, they became weaponized. Also, in the lore of that year, which is now gone, you can't find it anymore, the Wardens and Colonials were studying these sort of strange obsidian stones that kind of appeared all over the world and cursed all the forts. So now they've learned to harness that and basically trap souls of the cursed kind of evil spirits that come from the underworld during this period of time into these soul stones that then they can trigger and transform themselves upon death.
And that's where the Dead Harvest lore currently ends. As for the 2019 Dead Harvest event itself, while it had its highlights, many players saw it as a misstep. The mechs were notoriously buggy, the zombies were not well balanced, and the endless night mechanic made the early game frustrating for most players. Much of the content felt unfinished or underdeveloped. Though the second Dead Harvest event was not as well received as the first Dead Harvest event, the devs decided to bring it back once more in 2020. During the final year of Dead Harvest, the devs looked back at 2019 and saw their flaws and decided to work on some of the more unfinished and underdeveloped aspects of the event. Zombies were no longer a separate faction. This time they were more like weapons of mass destruction, and they were no longer called zombies as well. They were called the Cursed. Players had to actively choose to become the Cursed by using special crystals, essentially treating zombification as just another piece of equipment in the game. These crystals had to be crafted and transported to the front lines like any other logistics item. Players could use these crystals like some kind of power-up item and would instantly transform into a Cursed on the battlefield. With this new mechanic, they had unfortunately got rid of what made the gameplay so fun and chaotic. If you died, you didn't become a zombie, you just simply respawned as a regular human as well. The familiar 3 zombies or Cursed variants returned from the 2019 event, but this time the animations and powers were complete. The standard zombie was mostly unchanged. It was weak but fast. Choosing this form meant giving up ranged combat in exchange for the ability to charge into vehicles and cause melee damage. The Avertic was a fast-moving variant with a ranged attack, and was probably the most powerful out of all 3 variants. It could safely chip away at defenses from a distance. And the final form, the Baylor spawn. It had a devastating ground pound attack and had a high health pool, making it ideal for breaking through defenses and tank lines. However, it was expensive to deploy. These crystals were produced via portals placed in Logi towns. It added a strange, outworldly twist to an otherwise grounded war game. With all these new changes to the Cursed, the devs thought that each faction should receive some new toy as well.
This is, I'm not gonna lie, this is a part of us just being, hey, it would be cool if there was
If we had mechs.
combat, and Dead Harvest just happens to be like the excuse for us to have that in the game.
The Wardens during this event got a new mech type called the Scourge Hunter. It could be crewed by 4 players, one being the driver, one on the main gun which consisted of quad RPG launchers, a secondary gunner which controlled a heavy machine gun, and finally a commander seat with the ability to spot and use a secondary weapon. The Centurion mech returned from the previous year and was given to the Colonials. Unfortunately though, the 2020 Dead Harvest event came at a time when larger issues were plaguing the game. The Colonials at the time were lacking in players and committed clans, which led to the Colonials leaning very hard on solo players and randoms to push the fronts. Because of this, the Colonials had lost the war so fast that mechs had barely come out before it was all over. It ended so quickly that the devs decided to give it a second chance, and started the event up again in a new war. But this second war was even worse than the first. This time, no factions got to unlock the mechs. Sadly, this third Dead Harvest event, just like the second Dead Harvest event, was not very well received by the player base. The very next year, in October 2021, the devs officially announced that the Dead Harvest event would not be returning. All the devs' effort and hard work had become too much, especially after 2 back-to-back flops from Dead Harvest 2 and 3. When talking with other players, it seems out of all the 3 Dead Harvest events, most players seem to agree that the original 2018 version was the best and most fun. While I don't have any specific sources on hand, it's been mentioned multiple times, even as far back as DevStream 83, that the developers have officially moved on from Dead Harvest, something about it no longer aligning with Foxhole's current codebase or design direction. Still, I'd love to see the devs try more quirky or one-off events throughout the year, something wild or unexpected to break up the long grind of war. Looking back at these old dev blogs, which I really wish we got more of, the devs often mentioned how resource intensive these events were, and that's likely why we haven't seen anything similar lately. Even though Dead Harvest is gone, you can still find remnants of it scattered throughout the Foxhole world today. Little callbacks to a time when the undead walked the front lines. This October will mark 5 years since the last Dead Harvest event. Who knows though, maybe we'll see something like it return in Anvil Empires. A side note, while I was going through old dev streams, I found this gem and thought it was pretty funny with how our current meta is going. Sorry to future Foxhole players watching this if you don't get the reference.
Oh wait, there's one more thing.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
The best thing.
The best feature this year is that the shotgun has received a buff, and it actually is the anti-cursed weapon in this game. Yeah, the shotgun is making a comeback, at least for one more. So
Do you think they should bring back something like Dead Harvest or some other kind of special event? Let me know in the comments. Thank you to I Saw Bear for providing some of the Dead Harvest footage for this video. Make sure to check out his channel. He's a great Foxhole player and content creator. I will leave a link to his channel in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support. Make sure to subscribe for more Foxhole content. I'll see you out on the battlefield. Cheers.